لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله ما لنا رب سواه.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا ومحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Welcome to Sarf. Welcome to the class of Sarf. Today is the first lesson of learning about Sarf. Now, before getting into this book, Kitab al-Sarf, we need to talk about the importance of Sarf. Why is it important, and why are we studying this book? Because it is very important. When you get down into this book, we're going to get very detailed into Arabic grammar. When you are learning Sarf in depth, you may start asking yourself and question yourself, why am I studying this book? And many people may come to you and say, well, you're wasting your time. Why are you, putting your time learning another language? Just go study history or aqaid books. You will be good enough. That will be good enough for you. Why are you studying Arabic language in depth? And that's why we really need to know, why are we doing this? Why you study Arabic? And before, in Hausa, when you want to start studying any book, before you start that book, make sure you know why you are studying that book. So later on, you don't get lost. You don't question yourself. Why am I here? Why am I putting my time learning this language? So make sure you know why you're learning this language. And so, later on you don't become disappointed and hopeless and say, well, I'm putting a lot of year or 2 years learning this language, and why is this happening? Now, to answer this question, I would say that, first of all, as a scholar, as a Muslim scholar, a student of a Hausa, you should know that the main thing that you are going to be working on is Arabic text. You will be working with Arabic text, whether it's Quran, narrations from Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, or the sayings and the books of our previous scholars, the fiqh books that they have written, or aqaid books that they have written. So you are working with text, with Arabic text. And in order to be able to understand these words, you have to be very, very professional in the language, in the Arabic language, in order to understand their words and to pursue the purpose of Hausa, and the purpose of becoming a student of Hausa, which is to be able to derive the Islamic concepts from the Islamic resources. If you want to do that, you cannot depend on translations. If you go and look how many translations there are now for example, for Quran, there are maybe hundreds of different translations. You look under one ayah, they have translated one ayah in different ways. What can you depend on any of these translations? No. As a scholar, as a student of Hausa, you should be able to say which one is correct and which one is wrong. Some of them, obviously, they have not translated the Quran in the correct way, and you should be able to say it, whether it's wrong or right. And that's why you cannot pick and choose and say, okay, I just choose this translation and go with that. Of course, that wouldn't work, because there is no exact translation of Quran. There is no exact translation of narrations of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Inshallah, as you study this language, Arabic language, you would see that many words in Arabic don't even have any exact translation. You just have to understand the meaning of those words, and by that you would be able to understand this sentence. So it's very important to learn the language. So you don't depend on the translations that are existing right now. And inshallah, when you study this book, at the end of this book, you will go back to the translation and you will find a lot of false translations. And you say, well, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and this is correct. And this is the aim and the purpose of this study. And another thing I have to mention is that, when you go to academic institutes to learn a new language, they usually try to teach you how to speak that language. How their aim is for you to be able to speak that language fluently. But this is not the purpose of learning Arabic in Hausa, even though speaking Arabic is a privilege, is a good virtue to have, but it's not the purpose of studying Arabic language in Hausa. We learn the Arabic language in Hausa not only to be able to speak Arabic, but to be able to learn to understand the original text of our religion, Quran and narrations. Now, there are many different types of spoken Arabic language, in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, and other countries. All of them have their own type of speaking Arabic. We're not trying to learn their language. We're not trying to understand them, and we're not trying to be able to communicate with these people, and this is not our aim. Our goal is to be able to learn the original Arabic science and language and grammar to be able to understand Quran, because Quran is in the original Arabic. So, and it is very important to learn this. And you say, well, I just learned this language. Maybe I just put time, a year for that, and that would be done, and that would be it for me. No. Inshallah, when you get to the highest level of studying in Hausa, which is Bahth al-Kharij, you would see that our scholars spend many days, sometimes many days, to discuss over one word, one Arabic word, and its place in a sentence. One scholar, for example, say that this word in this sentence, in this narration, is na'at, which is a term in Arabic syntax, which means adjective. Another scholar say, no, this, for example, this word is hal. And based on each different interpretation and view, the meaning of the narration would change. And therefore, the fatwa of that faqih, of that scholar, would change regarding that matter. So, learning Arabic is very important to be able to drive the Islamic concepts, and you have to be really professional in this language, not just simple study of Arabic language, but you have to be very professional in this language, inshallah, by the help of Imam Mahdi Ajjallah Ta'ala Farajhu al-Sharif. Now, before we start this book, I want to just say two things before we start. Number one, how do we study Hausa books? Because this is the first lesson that you're gonna see and watch for the Arabic studies. I'm gonna say this that usually when you go to college or university, there's a presentation. There is a teacher, instructor who comes and presents or PowerPoint or a lecture, and you take notes and you study the notes, and you get an A, inshallah. But this is not the case in Hausa. In Hausa we read the textbook, and sometimes in college you have a textbook, but you never read one line from that textbook in the class. But in Hausa we read the text and we focus on the text. We read each line of the text. I either explain first and then read the text, or I read the text and then explain it. So we are dealing with the text. This book is in English, so it's good for you because you're not that familiar with the Arabic language. But the Arabic syntax, the Arabic nahw, that book Bida'atul Nahw, is in Arabic, and the reason why we focus so much on the text is, as I said earlier, we will be dealing with the text. You will be dealing with a lot of text in future. Quran, narrations, and the words of our scholars. So you should be a professional reciter of books, of texts. You should be very professional in understanding text. And so this is how we're going to study this book. Now, there are also, let me say this as well. There are 5 steps for studying a lesson. Traditionally, these are the 5 steps that are mentioned as a method of studying in Hausa. The first step is pre-study. Before you come to class, you study the lesson that you want to come and learn, right? You study it, you read it. Maybe you understand some parts of it. You don't understand some other parts. That's fine. You just want to get an overview, a general view of the lesson. That's the first step. The second step is that you come to class, right? Or in this case, you watch this video, and you have your book open in front of you, and you take notes, right? You read with me, and you take notes whenever I am giving you some notes. You take notes. That's the second step, which is listening and taking notes. The third step is it comes after the class. You should go back to the lesson and study yourself and read it one more time to see, if you understood the whole lesson completely or not. The fourth step is to have mubahatha. Mubahatha is basically when you sit with your partner, classmate, to discuss the lesson. For example, you sit. In this case, if we are not in a physical house, you can have a Skype meeting with your classmates and start teaching the class. Start teaching this lesson to your friends, as if you were a teacher and you're teaching your friends, and your friend starts asking you questions. Right? In this way, you both get what you are weak in and what you're strong in, and what you learn and what you did not learn, right? And the next day you do the opposite. Your classmate will teach you the lesson, the next lesson, and you will ask him questions. So this is mubahatha, a discussion that you can have as a fourth step of studying. And in this way, you might have there might be some questions some questions may come up to your mind, and you can ask me next time about that lesson. Okay, that's the fourth step. The fifth step, the last step, is to make a summary, right? You should have a notebook to write a summary of what you learned, right? For each lesson, try to summarize that lesson into. For a lot of these lessons that we're gonna learn, especially in Sarf, you would be able to make a chart, right? Start making charts for yourself, to summarize what you learned and from these books, inshallah. So these are the 5 steps of learning a lesson and studying basically a lesson in Hausa. Okay, I'm done with the prerequisites and the things that I needed to say. Before I start, let me say this. Let us, before we start, let us have a pure intention. This is, I say a lot of things, but I believe that this is the most important part. A pure intention is will be really helpful, inshallah, for you as you study, and Allah Ta'ala will help you. Have this intention. Ya Allah, my intention is to learn this language so I can understand your words. Ya Imam Mahdi, Ya Sahib al-Zaman. I'm trying to learn this language so I can understand your words. Have this pure intention to seek nearness to Allah Ta'ala, so you can learn and you can understand their words, Allah's word and Ahlul Bayt's word, so you can teach it to others, inshaAllah Ta'ala. Okay, introduction. I'm on the first page, introduction. Before delving into the study of tasrif, a number of preliminary matters must be introduced, beginning with the definition of tasrif, the organization of this study, and some terminology that will be useful during the course of this study. So this is ilm al-sarf. as, you know, a summary. This book is called a summary of tasrif. Those of you who know Farsi, this book originally was in Farsi. It's called Sarf Sadeh. Sarf Sadeh is a book that the students of Hausa study in Iran in the first year of Hausa. Before this book, Sarf Sadeh, there was another book long time ago. It was called Jami' al-Muqaddamat. And Sarf, Ilm al-Sarf, the knowledge of Sarf, was you know, part of that book, Jami' al-Muqaddamat. But now we have a separate book. It's called Sarf Sadeh, and a great translator Mr. Ali Abdul Rashid has translated this book and has called it a summary of tasrif. Okay, what is sarf? Before we get into this, the issues that we're gonna and the concepts that we learn in this book, we need to learn what is sarf. First of all, let me tell you that there are in Arabic language there are several different sciences. Number one is sarf. Sarf is morphology. Morphology means to be able to derive words out of one word. For example, you know, you have just like English, you have one word like to know, and you derive other forms of words from this word to know. You say he knows, he knew, and knowledge. Knows, knew, and knowledge are derived from the original word, which is to know. This is basically what we are about to learn in Ilm al-Sarf, morphology, how to conjugate one word into different forms. So basically we are focusing on one word, on words, right? We are focusing on words, how, like this, the word structure basically. Ilm al-Nahm, the second science in Arabic language, is called Ilm al-Nahm. Ilm al-Nahm, or syntax, deals with sentence structure. You know, we first of all we focus on word, then we zoom out and we come to a sentence. How to make a sentence? Where should the verb be? Where should the subject, then object? You know, which one should come first? Which one should come later? Right? And how and what i'rab, what vowels should we put on each word at the ending of each word? Inshallah, we'll talk more about it in Ilm al-Nahm. That is Ilm al-Nahm. The third knowledge is called balagha, or rhetoric. Now, rhetoric or balagha is the art of speaking and writing effectively. This is like it's basically an art, how to use figurative speech and how to make your sentences and words more effective. And the fourth science in Arabic language is Ilm al-Lugha. Ilm al-Lugha deals with the meaning of words and their origin. Where did they come from? What meaning does this word have? Does it have only one meaning, or has more than one meaning? Does it have more than one true meaning, or has figurative meanings? This is what you learn in Ilm al-Lugha. Now, Ilm al-Sarf and Ilm al-Nahm are taught in the first year of Hausa. You will learn all about Ilm al-Sarf, and you will be done with Ilm al-Sarf in this first year, inshallah. And also Ilm al-Nahm, you will learn Ilm al-Nahm, the general things that you need to learn about Ilm al-Nahm. You will learn it in this year. The second year, you will go more in depth into Ilm al-Nahm, because Ilm al-Nahm is the most important science in Arabic language. You know, inshallah, when you go there, when we talk about Ilm al-Nahm, you will see how important it is. So we will study Ilm al-Nahm more in the second year. And Ilm al-Balagha, we study it in the third year. In the third year of Hausa, with the book Jawahir al-Balagha or some other books, inshallah, we will study this science. So now we are in Ilm al-Sarf. We are just beginning to learn the Arabic language. Definition of tasrif. In the Arabic language, tasrif literally means to spend, change, to use, and more. As a technical term of linguistics, tasrif is the process of changing the patterns and forms of words in order to derive different meanings. A synonym of tasrif is sarf. So sarf, if you hear sarf or tasrif, there are synonyms. And as he explains it here, you can underline it here, and underline this sentence that says the definition of tasrif, that mentions the definition of tasrif, which is the process of changing one word into different forms. Tasrif is also called the morphology of Arabic. The study of tasrif involves the study of the hundreds of patterns and forms of words found in Arab language with regard to their origin, derivation, construction, and meaning. So we are going down in depth into words. And how to conjugate, as it says, mentions here, sometimes it goes up to 100 different forms. Because, like, for example, let me give you an example. One word, let's say, alima, ilm, which means to know. It can be conjugated, it can have fi'l al-madi, which is past tense verb, right? And they have 14 different sigha or patterns for fi'l al-madi, past tense verb. That would be for ma'lum. Then they have majhul form of that fi'l al-madi. So 14 plus 14 is 28. Then they have fi'l al-mudari. Fi'l al-mudari means present tense verb. That's also 14. So add another 14 to it. That one also has majhul or passive form, which is another 14. It can be conjugated into different forms by adding sin or sawfa before that as a prefix. Also qad, lan, lam. Each one, when it comes before one of these af'al al-mudari', it would have 14 different forms. Also, you have fi'l al-amr, fi'l al-nahy. Each one of these topics, these terms that I use, each one has at least 14 patterns. So you do the math. You see how many forms of words and verbs you are about to learn. The majority of words in Arabic can undergo a prolific process of derivation whereby one root word can become the source of literally hundreds of derivative words. These derivative words have their own particular pattern and form which distinguish them from their respective root words. To exemplify the point, from this one root word ilm, which means knowledge, the rules of tasrif can be applied to produce the following forms of verbs. So, let me just give you an example. We have one word which means knowledge, ilm, right? Another word we can derive out from this is alima. Alima means he knew. He knew. Another one is ya'lamu. Ya'lamu means he knows, present tense verb. Another one is i'lam. I'lam means know as a command verb. Another one is ulama. Ulama means it was known as a passive verb. Yu'lamu. Yu'lamu means it is known. So, you see, these 5 different figures, different patterns, are derived from one root word, which is ilm. The meaning changes to he knew, he knows, know, it was known, it is known, and be it known, respectively, without making any significant changes. 6 new words have been formed, all of which are verbs. The root word was a noun, and from it both nouns and verbs can be derived. Most of these forms of verbs also can be further conjugated according to the subject and number. In the final analysis, more than 76 other forms of these verbs can be derived from these 6 verbs alone, because each one has 14 different patterns. So alima has 14 patterns. Alima, alima, alimu, it's past tense verb, has 14. Ya'lamu has 14 different patterns. So add another 14 to it. I'lam, command verb. Ulama is a passive form of past tense. Yu'lamu is a passive form of present tense. And each one of these has 14. So you see how many forms we have just right here. Don't worry if you don't get that, because we're gonna have a specific lesson and about each one of these and how we derive it and how we make these verbs. I'm just giving you an example. This process of derivation also occurs in the noun, although to a lesser extent than with the verb. For example, the word rajul can be changed in form, thereby changing its meaning to the plural and dual and diminutive. For example, rajul, which means a man, you can change it to rajulan, which means two men, and rajal, which means men more than three, and rojail means a little man, right? So you see a word, a noun also can be conjugated into different forms and change into different forms. Okay, inshallah we'll continue this lesson next class. Be prepared inshallah next class when you want to start the lesson, have your book ready for you in front of you and be ready to take a lot of notes, inshallah. And before that, of course, as I said earlier in the beginning of this lesson, have pure intention to learn this language for the sake of Imam Mahdi Ajjallah Ta'ala Fajr Sharif, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi at-tayyibin.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum.